Perfect. So welcome everybody. We are really excited to be together for another great evening of connection and learning. And it's going to be a fun one tonight. We're trying out some new things, but to get us started, Tyson is going to do a land acknowledgement and help us get going in a good way.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, really excited to kick this off, as I think, with the springtime, and discuss a little bit further about that idea around relationship with place. And I think it's really important when we talk about land acknowledgements, the relationship with the land, and specifically the people of this land, and our responsibilities as Treaty 7 people. So we are hosting from Treaty 7, a territory, and it's the traditional territories and home of the Confederacy, including the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani. These lands are also home to the Tsuut'ina Nation, Stoney Nakoda Nation, and home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. Treaty 7 was and is a promise between nations to share the land and support one another, and it is up to each and every one of us to work to make this place and the world better for all future generations. And really kind of thinking about what are you doing to honor your relationship with the land and responsibilities as a treaty partner. So today we are going to do I'm going to be doing a little bit of a walk. And I guess for me, it's always, and as we're talking about what I'm seeing currently and thinking about what has the past and what the future can look like as it relates to reconciliation and acknowledging kind of whose land I'll be walking on for this evening.
Awesome, thanks, Tyson. And I've just thrown into the chat two really practical ways that you can kind of support some efforts that are underway right now. So if you haven't heard yet, there are efforts underway to get Langevin School renamed. Langevin is a school in Bridgeland that is named after the creator of residential schools. And so there is a group of people actively seeking support to get that name changed. It's really quite a painful and harmful experience for people to have to go to that institution, recognizing what that has kind of resulted in and who it's celebrating. And the other group that we've thrown in the chat here that we just want to shout out is it's really important for us to think about the land, as Tyson said, and to also support the people of this land in their efforts to kind of protect and steward the land. And one way you can do that is by checking out the Niitsitapi Water Protectors, who are a group of Blackfoot people who are trying to kind of help ensure that the waters in the land kind of stay safe and stay kind of able to fulfill life. So you can check out those if you're interested. The information is in the chat. And we really want to encourage people to kind of take their role as somebody who is living on these lands seriously and kind of actively be taking steps, meaningful steps to honoring relationships with people on the land. So we are going to give you a really quick overview of the evening before jumping in. But before we do that, I will introduce myself, which I always forget to do. So my name is Amanda Palmer. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a white settler woman who has been a guest here in Mohkinstsis for the past 7 years. And I have had the privilege of being the lead of the Community Development Learning Initiative here for the past 2 years now. And I'm super excited to go on this learning journey with you tonight. And I'm very excited to introduce or invite him to introduce himself. But Tyson has recently more formally joined the CDLI team. He's kind of been involved in CDLI for years. But Tyson, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Tyson. For those of you who I have not met, Tyson Bankert. My pronouns are he, him. And I'm really excited to be part of a little more of CDLI over the next few months or however long, and just to kind of engage more with this really great group. And I'm really also excited to kind of today, although it's like looking a little bit like drab, but you know what? We're gonna have an adventure as I go outside, but also kind of talk a little bit about my neighborhood, which is where I'm currently in Crescent Heights. and it's work that I do here, a lot of community development work here as well. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. If you ever want to engage and talk about community development, I'm more than happy to talk about it and love hearing new ideas and actions that people are doing. So that's a little bit about me. And it's really also great to see people who I haven't seen in quite a long time as well. Some of the names look very, very familiar. So it's good to see you folks as well.
Awesome, thanks, Tyson. And we'll just also do a really quick overview of CDLI. There's a few people whose names are not familiar, so just to make sure we're all on the same page. So the Community Development Learning Initiative is a network for community-minded Calgarians, and we like to come together for important conversations to connect, inspire, and act. And all of that is in an effort to make our communities better. So we host regular gatherings like this one, which we call our monthly meetup. We also will host regular gatherings for community development practitioners to help deepen their practice. We have a community development learning program called Success in Community Action, which I know many of you are alumni for. Is that the plural? I can never remember, but that's an 8-week learning program that we have, which is always really wonderful to participate in. And we're also always looking for new ways that we can connect and support community development initiatives here in Calgary and the surrounding areas. Tonight we have come together to explore the topic of engaging community through our strengths, asset mapping, and COVID. And we're super excited about what we've got in store for you today. So during COVID-19, we've been sacrificing personal relationships this past year so we can stay safe. And for many of us, we've been going on a lot of walks to make it through. Through that, we've been getting to know our physical neighborhood much more intimately, maybe discovering places that have been there that we've never really noticed before. And we may have also identified a greater meaning for our neighborhood because of this. So tonight, we're going to look at opportunities to dig deep into what it means, what that means through the qualities of community development. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a real quick overview of community assets. Like, what do we mean when we talk about assets and asset mapping? And we'll give you a chance to dig in on what that might look like in your own communities. And then we are very privileged tonight to have the incredible Julie Black here from the Calgary Foundation, who is one of the city's greatest community champions, in my opinion, and who is also one of the forces behind the Jane's Walk here in Calgary, which is coming up this weekend. So Julie's going to talk to us about the Jane's Walk Festival and how you can be a part of it. And then Tyson's going to introduce a mini asset mapping worksheet that he's recently developed that is intended to be used on walks. And he's going to do that by going live on a walk in Crescent Heights while we're here on Zoom. So we're going to experiment with Zooming while walking tonight together, which should be an adventure. And then before we close out for the night, we're also going to share again a tool that we shared back in August. It's a virtual marketplace tool that is a kind of quick and easy way to create opportunities for exchange between people that works really well online. So a big agenda for the day, but we're super excited to dive into it all together. And so with that, Tyson, do you want to give us a quick overview on what are community assets?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Yeah, we have a pretty jam-packed, so I'll keep it quick, but I also think what's really been impactful for me, and I kind of wrote about this in the blog yesterday about sort of why I think this is really important, as someone who is a community developer and engages in my neighborhood with people, and knowing that that's been really restricted and limited. What does that mean for my relationship with my neighborhood? Because that's typically how it's been. It's been about the people. And so, but then really the last year has been like this holistic view of what makes my neighborhood complete, which is not just people, but it's also the places and the things that make it unique and other opportunities that I can to connect. And so this is a little bit of where this toolkit has started to come out of, and what this could potentially look like. So a little bit about community assets. So and so really looking at our individual assets, we all have sort of unique strengths, talents, and capabilities. in ourselves that we would like to, of course, engage with our neighbors. But we also can think of it on a broader level. So assets of our community as a way of that holistic view. So people and place. And so communities are diverse and potent webs of gifts and assets. Each is inherently unique, looks different, and will benefit from different ways of mapping their assets. There is no right way to do this. And each neighborhood, as I'm sure you are aware, throughout our city is very different. It has unique things to them. Some are a little bit easier to spot, some are a little bit harder to find, a little bit harder. But there are sort of 5 broad categories of community assets that we try to identify. So one is sort of the individual assets, as I've mentioned, the people and their superpowers. And then there's informal associations. So that's volunteer groups, small groups that are happening, community associations, book clubs, parent groups, the places that potentially neighbors can connect with, connect. And then you have your local institutions. So these are maybe more paid groups or social services providers, nonprofits, like for example in Crescent Heights, there's the Women's Center, libraries, local government businesses, your electoral officials. And then there's what we're going to be looking at today is the physical assets. So land, buildings, parks, locales. And then there's the more nuanced thing, which is the connections and exchanges as the 5th and final sort of major category, which is those relationships that exist and the opportunities that are presented because of those strong relationships. And so we're going to send everyone to some breakout rooms quickly to have a chance to consider what assets you might have in your community. So if it's helpful, you can capture your examples on the shared slide in that document tonight that I believe is up as well. And just sort of begin to sort of think about your neighborhood or within the conversations you're having and what sort of unique assets you have within those sort of 5 kind of broad categories.
Thanks so much, Tyson. So I've shared a link to the slides in the chat if it's helpful for you to have that reference and be able to see what those examples are. And like Tyson said, we have a couple of slides available where you can click on a Post-it note, move it over, double click to type, and you're good to go. You do not need to use this if you don't want to, but it's there to help with note taking if you do. But we're going to send you into breakout rooms now for about 10 minutes to share what some of the assets are in your community, and then we will come back together. So enjoy your conversation. Welcome back. All right, I think we've all made it back now. Hopefully that was a good enough time to start to work through some examples. I saw some ideas getting thrown into the Google Slides. Does anybody have any lingering questions about community assets and what they are? All right, well, I think hopefully your silence and lack of messages in the chat means that you feel like you have a pretty good handle on that. No, this is not a new concept for many of you. So now I would like to turn it over to one of Calgary's greatest community assets, both in terms of people, but also the associated institution of the Calgary Foundation. And I think also I would categorize the Jane's Walk Festival as like one of those connection assets. But Julie Black is an incredible human being, somebody who is a big part of why our communities are as great as they are. And Julie is going to share with us tonight a little bit about this weekend's upcoming Jane's Walk and what that looks like in COVID times. So Julie, do you want to tell us a little bit about Jane's Walk and what to expect?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Amanda, and thank you for that. That was ridiculous, but I loved it. Thank you. Very generous. So hi, other folks on the line here with us this evening. So I'm Julie Black. I've been with Jane's Walk, which is a program of the Calgary Foundation since it started this would be our 14th year, our 14th May of offering this weekend of free neighborhood walking tours, essentially is what it is. I have lovely memories over the 12 years we were able to do it properly of these clusters of people, maybe 25, maybe 40, maybe 3, maybe a couple of times we've had hundreds, but they've been rare, walking with a tour guide around various parts of Calgary for the simple purpose of connecting with where we live. That's really the essence of it. It's an initiative that runs across the world, on every continent except Antarctica, I always like to say, with tour guides of various persuasions and kinds. We're really trying to, I always say, democratize the microphone, the walking tour, so that anyone with stories to tell and an interesting conversation that can lend itself to the walking tour format has been invited to lead a walk for us. So we've had walks led in neighborhoods across the city. We're very proud of that. It hasn't just been in the handful of neighborhoods people know are great places to go on a Saturday. They've been in neighborhoods that people haven't known are also great places to go explore with someone who knows them well. They've touched on all sorts of themes. So people might want to do their walk about things that Jane Jacobs, the woman that this festival is named for, that she talked about, maybe density, maybe the use of old buildings and their importance in neighborhoods, maybe on walkability, or maybe it's local history, or maybe it's the environment, or maybe it's something more personal, family stories, trying to reconnect neighbors. I remember one in the North Central where a family organized a Jane's Walk because they realized that their street had turned over. Everyone else was new to the street and they'd been there for 20 years. So they took it as an opportunity to meet their neighbors. They organized a little walk. They advertised it in the mailboxes, essentially, of their neighbors. I don't know that it was up on our program so anyone else could have joined them, but I think in the end, it really was 10 people from a neighborhood walking and talking, getting to know each other as neighbors. So all sorts of memories I have of this wonderful thing. But here we are in COVID. So we were geared up last year to run it and canceled it because of COVID. And this year we decided it was too risky to gear up and organize it again. We didn't want to ask our volunteers, because it's all volunteer. People volunteer to lead, design their walk. We didn't want to ask people to put that effort in, knowing it might get canceled because of public health. We also didn't want to ask them to do the numbers patrol, to do the mask interventions, if any of those were necessary. So what we decided to do more intentionally this year than last year is really to try to capitalize, if that's not too strong a word, on the phenomenon of walking, what walking in our neighborhoods has become for many, many people during COVID. So I've heard from, I don't have any research behind this, but certainly talking to lots of folks over the last few months about the time that they're spending, intentional, slow time in their own neighborhoods, has really opened something up for them, a sense of connectedness to just to go slow and to see how the neighborhood is working, who's there with them, what's around this corner? How does this street work for walking across? What's this intersection like as a pedestrian? And so on and so on. Jane's walks aren't fitness walks. They're not really a traditional historic walking tour full of facts and figures. They're a little bit more exploratory than that, getting us to slow down out of our busy lives to really check in with what's happening around us. So to that end, what we decided to do is to pull together this toolkit to encourage people to turn, if they've been out walking or cycling, or if they have a mobility impairment that it's not walking, it might be in their wheelchairs or on their scooters. If they've been doing time like that, why not turn your own personal walk into a little bit of a Jane's walk? So we've given some prompts about what people might want to think about when they're out there. We've suggested people might want to be like a walking tour guide for themselves and do some research before they go. So we put some links to the material about City Calgary public art, for example. Maybe there's a piece of public art one block over from your usual route that you've just never gone over to see. Or maybe you want to be like Karen Begg, who's led walks for us many, many years in Dover, who has just done these such wonderful things like figuring out the names of the mountain ranges from the place, the bluff that she likes to walk on, and where she can see the mountains. And now she knows those mountains and some of the stories behind them. She also looked, for example, why the schools in her neighborhood had the names that they had. I'll mention that because of the intervention at the beginning about the Langevin School in Bridgeland, Riverside. So maybe do some research before you head out and learn some facts about your neighborhood. Or you can follow in someone else's footsteps. We put some walking tour maps up on our website as well, so that you can head out yourself to see what someone else has put together for you. We've mostly drawn on things that people have developed already. So, and people have been really quite delighted when we've asked if we can help promote them, because people put a lot of effort into these things. So it's great if we can get a few more eyes on them. So for example, the Glenbow Ranch Provincial Park, just north of the city on the way to Cochrane, has a walking tour of one of their trails told by Stony Nakota elders. So it's as if you're walking with them and you can learn something about that space, perhaps just from home, if that's where home feels safe, but perhaps from home, and then also go for a walk at the park. We've also got the map put together by the folks who have that phenomenal garage door art in Sunnyside, in that northwest neighborhood. So you can see where people, residents, have hired artists or done it themselves and put some wonderful art on their garages in their alleyways. Or you might want to look at the art on International Avenue. So in the Greater Forest Lawn, there's all sorts of wonderful art there. And there's a great map that shows you how to find it and tells you something about the pieces of art. So you can take the toolkit and go for a walk in your own neighborhood based on some of our ideas. You can take a look at a map or a video to go where someone else has already gone before. And you can do this in your own neighborhood, which is great, or you can take the challenge up and go somewhere new in our city. I'm not from Calgary originally. I'm from Ottawa area, the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. And I was really surprised moving out here how faithful Calgarians can be to their quadrant. So it'd be fun if somebody took the Jane's Walk weekend to walk in a different quadrant than they've walked in before. Or maybe use some of our tools to find a neighborhood that's of a different age than the one that you live in, to see how it's designed differently, and do some thinking about what that design might mean as someone living in a neighborhood. Or maybe go somewhere that you don't know there's something interesting to see. One thing I've loved about Jane's Walks over the years, a friend of mine who grew up in Calgary often talks about how she saw them as an invitation to go to a neighborhood she didn't know there was anything to see. So you could treat Jane's Walk this week the same way, by going to a neighborhood that you don't know, that's different than yours, that isn't the traditional walking neighborhood in our estimation or the mythology of the city, and find something great. I'm personally quite obsessed with Martindale at the moment, even though I don't live in Martindale. I'm in the Northeast, but not Martindale, but it's such a fun Saturday afternoon place for street life. And cricket. So it's all very, very good. So resources to help people go out walking, we're going to have them up. We have many up now. We'll keep adding them throughout the weekend. but we're going to keep them up because there's no reason not to keep walking all spring and summer. We also want them to be there in case people don't feel comfortable walking right now because of the current pandemic climate. There's no rush. We're not trying to cluster people or have a bunch of people out in the same places at the same time. So those resources will be there for you as well throughout the spring and summer. And we've also got links to some of the international Jane's Walk offerings. Cities around the world are doing virtual Jane's Walks this year as we are. So why not watch videos or take virtual walks with other cities, use it for a bit of traveling. I just found out that New York City obviously is one of the great Jane's Walk cities because of Jane Jacobs' connections there and what she's meant to the development of that city, or the undevelopment, depending on how you look at it. So I know they had one on Underground Railroad and how that shows up in New York City. That was on today, but it's on demand. So I'm going to watch it sometime later this week. So there's resources there to go for a Jane's Walk in another city from your living room or couch. And really, then share. That's right. That's what this slide is up there. We'd love to have a little traffic over the weekend because this is the Jane's Walk weekend of people who are taking up our offer to go for a walk, think about your walk differently or walk somewhere new or enjoy a walk from home. We're doing this really for a couple of reasons. One is to keep the flame alive for Jane's Walk so that when people are able to gather again, we can organize the walking tours again. We tried to think of something maybe a little more lighthearted, thinking that life is quite grim and tough for many of us right now. So perhaps a little joy wouldn't go amiss. And the whole concept of meaningful fun, maybe you want to take the asset map out and enjoy walking around wherever you want to walk, but also learn something and build towards something. And we wanted to honor what's going on. This is part of just acknowledging the role that walking or cycling or rolling are having in many people's lives right now. And let's share that solo time together. So Amanda, that's really what I wanted to say. I'm happy to answer any questions or hear if anyone wants to agree or disagree about what walking might be meaning to folks right now. I don't know if anyone has any stories or experiences they could share with the group about what this kind of intentional, slow time in your own neighborhoods and communities might be meaning to you if you found a difference. I'd be happy to hear about any of those things.
I haven't gone far this year, but last year I took several walks to neighborhoods that I knew growing up. So I like to walk through Mount Royal and have somebody with me that's interested in the old houses or the stories of the early homeowners. So we went past my grandmother's house and my music teacher's house and different landmarks like that.
I always feel like I should warn people, and I forgot to do it, that if you tell me anything like that, that's just too lovely, I might bother you some year to lead a Jane's Walk, because I would love to walk in Mount Royal with you and hear those stories. We've had Matt Masters, who's done this for a few years, and he's called it his free range boyhood in the Southwest neighborhoods he grew up in, and it was just delightful. So anyway, I should warn people, it's too late for you, Elizabeth, you've already spoken, but I think that's lovely. Go to neighborhoods you've had a connection with and see how they've changed and not changed, and the memories it brings back.
Another one that's fun to do is Marta Loop, to follow where the street railway went and tell people about the time that they laid some track on 32nd Avenue, and then the people on 26th Avenue said, oh, but we were promised the railway first. So they took up the 32nd track of a few blocks that they had laid and put it somewhere else. But it affected the development of the Marta Loop area, because people built along the
along the track.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love stories of community, what would we say, pushback, I guess, right? When people's voices, and they brought them forward.
So my my school ground has a condo building where the boys' playground used to be, and they have recently opened an expensive senior residence where the girls' playground used to be, and sea spaces in between. So one of the fellows posted on an interesting story on Facebook about something that happened in probably the 1940s. I suspect the military group was getting ready for the Stampede Parade or some other parade, and they invited all the kids to come outside and cheer and make a noise to see how the horses would react to a crowd.
Ah,
So then I posted a link to show them where what the senior building looked like on Street View. And anyway, it gives me something to talk about besides the weather and COVID.
and you know, for me, as someone who even just listening to stories like that, I just have this sense of it layering my sense of belonging. You know, I have one more story, even if it's not my story, I have one more story connected to this place. And all of that knits this sense of, you know, this is my place, and I have a role here, and a community here, and a life here, and a commitment here. Not to be too grandiose about what your small stories just did, but I do think it all adds up. You know, it all adds up to our sense of being connected to place. Is anyone else okay to share something? Does anyone else have something they'd like to say?
I'm torn as to which neighborhood. I live in Dover. I go to church in Tuxedo Park, and right across the street from us is they're planning on building a gigantic residential commercial, 2 towers, 400 more people. And that kind of project is happening a lot off 16th Avenue. So a sense of what density would be like and what density is like now might be sort of useful.
I think that's right. You know, one of the principles around why the folks in Toronto who were friends with Jane Jacobs started Jane's Walk way back in 2007 is they really took seriously her thought that before we change anything, we should go and see how it works. So it doesn't mean you won't change it, but do it based on that location. And so that lived kind of knowledge, I think, is really great. So go see what a similar kind of building might feel like from the street, from around the neighborhood, and see how it interacts. It can be a really powerful way of understanding, as opposed to something that's maybe more theoretical, if you know what I mean. And it is funny, many of us are connected to different neighborhoods. In our discussion, me and Suzanne, just before this, about asset mapping, we did talk about how we're connected to many places, our own neighborhoods in some ways and at certain times, but also the neighborhood in which we work, when those of us who are working from home used to go to the office or whatever, or where our kids went to school, et cetera, et cetera. We are many neighborhoods, many of us, and that's okay. It's how it is in a city.
I think it's a reflection too of how we are part of so many different communities, and I think the Jane's Walk is such a beautiful reminder that like place matters to us, and that we experience place so differently. And it's a great invitation to take that time to go and explore the known and the unknown, and find out what new things you might discover. Thank you so much for coming and sharing that. I've thrown into the chat the link to the Jane's Walk page on the Calgary Foundation's website, and it's also linked throughout. I pulled these 3 slides from the toolkit. It's a fantastic resource. Highly recommend that you check it out and share it with others as well. But part of what sort of sparked the connection between the Jane's Walk and asset mapping for us were these really fantastic questions that have been put forward to help guide the Jane's Walk this year. So this invitation to think about when I walk, I think about blank. When I walk, I notice blank. When I walk, I appreciate blank. We saw a lot of connections with those questions to some of the work and thinking that Tyson's been doing around asset mapping. We thought, oh, well, what better way to kind of introduce a new tool than to use this Jane's Walk as an opportunity to encourage people to go out and walk and explore the different areas of the city, and also kind of encourage that movement piece, and using this as a way to do something that's normally collective, but being able to do it on our own. I think that there's like a really interesting transition opportunity during the COVID times here that the Calgary Foundation and Jane's Walk people have done really well of creating something that's familiar but slightly different for COVID times. So Tyson is on site in Crescent Heights and is going to go on a little walk with us to kind of introduce us to some different features of Crescent Heights as a way to explore the toolkit. But before we do that, we just wanted to give a few examples of what asset mapping can look like. We talked about asset mapping we talked about assets as things that we have in community that can be really varied. And asset mapping is sort of the exercise of taking that and plopping it onto a map. And when we think of maps, we often think of like physical maps like this, where you can kind of see a neighborhood or a region and you're plopping things on here. These are some screen grabs of 2 Calgary-based community asset maps that are linked in the slides. But community asset maps can also be much different than that. It doesn't have to be a Google map. You can kind of hand draw it, just have it be words. Asset maps can look like a lot of different things. And the tool that Tyson has put together is a series of questions to help us think about our communities as we're walking through them. Asset mapping is usually something that you do in a group, and it can be like quite a fun exercise. This tool is something that you could encourage a bunch of different people of your community to kind of do it on their own or with their own families. And then you can kind of take all that and together build something out of it. So this is just sort of like a snapshot of what that tool looks like, but we've also broken it down into a couple of slides. And yeah, Tyson, is there anything else you want to say before you take us on this walk? The one thing I do know is that everybody, to try to help like ease the data situation, if everybody else could turn off their cameras for this walk, we think that that will help make the connection a little bit better.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow. Okay, things are working. Yeah, I am live on location in Crescent Heights. I'm really excited to kind of go do something a little bit different and go exploring. When we look at that tool and some of the questions, one of them is, what did you see that's something new that I haven't seen before? So I'm actually going to show you what I see. And I walk this community about 4 times a day, and yet I've never seen this before. And so really quickly, see this little cat here? It's like a shadow of a cat. I don't know if, see that? Get a little closer.
Oh yeah.
That's something that I've never seen before. And I mean, it's art. That's what kind of makes it sort of, let me just get 1 second here. Okay, that's a little bit better. A little bit more around the art is something I don't see. So we're going to take a little bit of a tour. It's about maybe 15 minutes around. And if you're familiar with this neighborhood, I'm sure you'll have seen things that you maybe have seen before. Let me just get my camera here a little bit better. Okay, so good. There we go. To start off with, actually, this is this C-can here. This C-can here is actually the Calgary Placemaking Library. That's a skunk, actually, Carol. If you that's, or at least this was a skunk. The other one was a cat, if you can see. And but this is the Calgary Placemaking Library that the city of Calgary had implemented in Crescent Heights. And so I think it was really interesting to kind of think about placemaking as it relates to asset mapping as well, as like what places in our community, in our neighborhood, can we begin to create that sense of place and identity, similar to what Julie was talking about. So I'm going to keep walking here.
So Tyson, some of the kind of big questions that frame this document are, did you notice anything new on your walk? You've showed us a cat so far. And another is, did you identify natural places where neighbors can bump into each other, and where are they located?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a place up above here that I'm just going to show us really quickly. I'm kind of showing you a few of the shops here along Center Street. And one of the questions too that we ask about is around where people can sit and that natural place to gather. So there's a couple of benches here. Crescent Heights did actually a bench festival, I guess, probably back at the beginning of February, where there were several different benches that were created for exactly that, those natural places for people to gather around. And one of the other questions was around, are there places to sit, like I mentioned, but then also a bus stop, thinking about different transportation as well. This isn't, I wouldn't say maybe a natural gathering place, but it's definitely two pillars here. The store that I'm at here, and they have a very large patio as another opportunity for people to gather as well. And I think we're seeing this a lot more often as well with COVID and this idea of being able to be outside more and being able to sit around. Here's another bench as well. Another bench people can sit at. Another really unique and special thing as well that is in Crescent Heights is this community fridge here. And so the community fridge is to me, it really signifies a lot of the dignity, food dignity, and being able to have anyone can come and take from the food the community fridge, and also leave food and also take food. And there isn't a really an amount that one can take as well. Here's some more community art here on a house, groups of houses. I think there was a question in the chat there that I kind of happened to see.
Yeah, so Anna asked if there's a website with more information about the Placemaking Library. I just Googled really quickly and didn't see anything, but do you know offhand if there's a...
Yeah, there actually is a website for, oh, sorry, no, there is actually not. But I can definitely connect you with the person in the city who helped us put that together. And right now, there is not a lot of different placemaking elements, just with COVID and those sort of things. But you can imagine there being different, maybe sporting equipment, like chessboards, that kind of thing, where people can essentially rent out and then bring back to the community association. So I can definitely connect you with that person who helped us.
Awesome, thank you. So in addition to kind of thinking through sort of noting some of the assets that we had talked about at the start of the evening, like what kind of like local businesses are here, where are those park spaces and things like that, things like the community fridge. And in addition to some of those bigger questions of like, did you notice anything new on the walk, or those natural places where people can bump into each other? One of the questions that we thought was really important to include in this was, how would other populations experience the walk? So that could be people with accessibility barriers, could also be different age groups. So like, how might children experience this part of the neighborhood, or tourists? So do you have any reflections as you're going on this walk right now, Tyson, of how you as a resident experience this, and how others in different demographics might experience it?
Yeah, I'll kind of show you a little bit of a view here. This is kind of like, I think, so we have a lookout, and lots of people do happen to come to this area who maybe are visitors or tourists by chance. And I think one of the things too is there's no real, is like, I think a really, and this is something that we've thought about, is that wayfinding component, like how people actually get around. And I think when we think of asset mapping, I think that's a really important piece to that, especially if you're someone who maybe isn't familiar with this area. Another really interesting element too about how maybe other people, different groups of people who might get around, is how they might experience certain things, is kind of who, because we're sort of inner city, and for me what's really important is knowing that like people who maybe don't own homes here, or maybe who even have who don't maybe have residents, the typical neighbor, knowing that there's actually, but that's an experience as well, very much so in our neighborhood, around maybe different groups who are engaged with our neighborhood as well. So we have folks from more marginalized communities that engage with our neighborhood, and it would be really interesting to see like, what are their assets to this neighborhood? Maybe it has to do with the community fridge, or the ways in which at the top of the hill, for example, are the parks and that kind of thing.
And I think that kind of connects back to what Julie was talking about too, with using the Jane's Walk as an opportunity to walk somewhere different, whether it's a different neighborhood or even a different part of the neighborhood that you live in, and really try to kind of use it as an opportunity to experience it like somebody else who's not you might.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, when we get up to the top of the hill here, I'll kind of talk a little bit further about it. Also, one of the questions was on there was, do you see any murals or other sort of art as well? And I think this is like one of them that's very much a public art that was put on last summer. And then thinking about also like, there's little things that make a place as well that are also creative. For example, we're just coming up here, but typically though, this fence has been used with yarn, for example, which isn't something that's necessarily been designated as a place to do that, but it's something that like creates that sense of character, which is one of the kind of the major themes in the initial steps of this toolkit.
Absolutely. So two things I want to bring up from the chat. So one is, I'm not sure of their name, but somebody brought up that the trees on the streets can make a big difference to how it feels. Tall, mature trees can give a sense of peace, especially if there's not too much traffic. And yeah, I think even just kind of where the fence is versus where the like views of the fence versus views where you don't see the fence makes such a difference in terms of the experience. Julie adds that the mural improved that stretch of road so much. I never liked walking that before because it felt trapped between hill and cars and it's dusty. Completely agree with that. I was also always really just nervous. Like I felt like I wasn't supposed to walk there. before the mural, and now it feels like a space where you can walk, which is something I wanted to kind of like connect back to a comment Julie made in the chat a little earlier, a question of I wonder if people sit on benches when they're so pretty. And so when you were speaking to the wayfinding, it got me thinking of like perhaps when we kind of like intentionally identify these things, that can help with us and feeling like, oh, this is something that I can actually use and participate in, as opposed to a decorative thing.
When I think of accessibility and the lookout, I think of also of just, I mean, there's the road right here, Samus Road. There's also gravel, and there's also these steps, depending on one's sort of various mode of transportation. It could be easier or harder, but there's like different ways to maybe get up to this lookout versus maybe only just one. And still knowing, acknowledging that that might have some limitations as well. But then the road that I just came down is a lower grade for maybe other folks who have a harder time.
So kind of the toolkit that Tyson's put together, we've kind of gone over a lot of the big questions, and I think kind of meant to be a combination of sort of noting specific examples of things like bus stops or like different types of assets that are in the community, as well as some of these bigger reflection questions. But there's also a question around, or kind of a section around character, with 3 questions that I think would be interesting to kind of both hear your thoughts, Tyson, as you're walking, but also if people want to throw in their thoughts in the chat based on what you've seen. So those character questions are, what did you observe as beautiful on your walk? What did you observe as unique? And any heritage or historical observances?
Well, that comment about the trees, I think, is also really interesting. There's a tree walk that actually happens during the Jane's Walk, and there's a arborist here who knows a lot about the various trees. Some of them are very old and very unique, and talks about how they kind of can produce that character. So maybe depending what you view as beautiful, perhaps. Also in that initial character piece, I asked about the question around that historical piece. And so there is the Center Street Lion that has been moved. So it is just right here as well. I'm a little bit of a nerd for this stuff. I actually had like a whole conversation with one of the curators specifically for this lion, and just sort of that it's over 100 years old, and there's one that sits at City Hall as well. So they're brothers, I guess, in the way that I talk about it. And then there's also and then there's their cousins that are, if you've ever been to, I think it's in London, there's lions there, and that's kind of the representation of it. But of these current lions that are here. So I think this also adds sort of character to a neighborhood. There's a park behind me as well. So spaces for opportunities like placemaking potentially, or bumping into your neighbor. Dogs are a huge thing that, I mean, I have a dog here, and lots of other folks do as well, as a way to like sort of organically bump into people who also are dog owners or are not as well.
Any other thoughts on the character of the community that emerged during the walk for you or for anyone watching? I see in the chat, what is the lighting like there? Is the space usable during our long winters with their short days?
Up along the ridge, yes. Just along here, yeah, there is actually quite lighting. The lion does get lit up as well. So there is some lights there at the foot of the feet of the lion, I guess you could say.
That's fantastic. And Julie also commented, I always imagine that British heritage lion talking with the Chinese heritage lions that are found below the hill in Chinatown. And that's such a delightful image. Elizabeth asks, did the streetcar go up the hill east of Center Street?
I have no idea. That's a really great question. Yeah, I don't know.
I'll have to do some digging.
I think as well, it's something that, like, once again, like the idea of these initial questions is to kind of percolate, like, oh yeah, what was there? What did happen? What is maybe other people's experiences like currently, and being able to have that intentional perspective when you go on walks, or you know, as we are in during these times of, yeah, how can I kind of still maintain connection to my neighborhood if maybe if it was, for me, for example, the people that kind of made the place versus now I can sort of have a better understanding of the last year and a half of the walking of things that I really find value.
Awesome. Any last thoughts from you, Tyson, or from anyone on the walk and on how you might use the tool on a walk this weekend or beyond?
I'm just going to comment super quickly on the fact that I think, like, mindfulness, I'm one of those people that is like a fast walker, and I just like do it to walk to kind of regulate to pace and stuff like that. But when you actually slow down and you're mindful to all your senses, like, you could see your community in a completely different light. So I'm making it intentional to kind of like ask myself these questions every time I go outside now.
I really love that, especially, I think that's always important, but something that kind of I learned a couple months ago about kind of being in these virtual settings so much is that we aren't engaging all of our senses. We're mostly just engaging sight and sound if we're able. And so kind of like being really intentional about soaking in our community through all of our senses as we go on these walks is a really beautiful, powerful thing.
I think, you know, like the seeing that cat was a great example of slowing down, because I was just kind of sitting there listening to Julie, and then being able to say, and then I noticed that I was like, oh, how very quaint is that, right? And so that's just something that I think, to Paulina's point about slowing down and being able to have that opportunity to see the things that maybe you didn't know, that you didn't notice, that make it very special.
Well, how about we take a quick 5-minute break now, and when we come back, we will talk a little bit about next steps, and then we'll introduce the virtual marketplace tool. Does that sound like a plan? And hopefully that gives Tyson time to get back home.
Almost there.
So we'll see you all. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I've got another webinar. There's 2 back to back, and I'm going to have to take in the other one, but I love this part. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks for being here, Penny. You
Okay.
can watch the recording for the rest, but we'll talk to you again soon, hopefully.
Thanks.
All right, well, let's get back to it. Hopefully that was enough time for everyone to get up and stretch, get some refreshments, do whatever you need to do, pet your furry friends, check on your kids. we wanted to we're not going to spend too much time on this, but we did want to say that the tool that's been developed has been developed intentionally to allow for really personal perspectives on noting what those assets of a community are. Which in itself really can help make our connection to the places that we spend time more meaningful, and to kind of inspire us to feel that bigger sense of belonging to place, whether that's where we live or where we work, or just a part of the city that we really love to enjoy. It's also an opportunity to be able to invite many different people from that community to kind of go on their own journeys and their walks, and to be answering those questions as well, and then take time to pull out all of those responses together and make sense of that together to develop a bit of a map in these COVID times. So we're not going to kind of get down into what that could look like right now, but what we are offering is, if you are keen to do some of this mapping, not just on your own, but to invite some other community members to do that as well. 2 weeks from tonight, I think it's a Monday, 2 weeks from tonight, Tyson and I will be back for about an hour to host a data party. So we're encouraging people to go out, do your walks, use the toolkit, and get other people to do, and then whether it's 2 people, whether it's 10, kind of bringing that together and making sense of what that can kind of speak to in terms of the assets of the community. That is our invitation to you. And if you're not able to make that, definitely get in touch with us if you're interested, and we will be happy to check in with you. But we are going to move on now to talking about another tool that works to help us identify some assets in our community and create those opportunities for exchange. Kari, yes, we will send out the toolkit. After the session tonight, we will send it out to everyone who's here. We just need to make sure we have your email addresses, but that's going to come up really shortly. I've also just set into the chat a link to sign up for the data party in 2 weeks. So I'm going to dive into the virtual marketplace tool really quickly. It's a great tool. It's one that I learned last summer at a virtual unconference on asset-based community development. And we first shared it with the community last August at our meetup, but we thought there's been a lot of interest in it, so we'll share it again. And much like with the asset mapping toolkit that we'll share with you afterwards, we'll also share with you this resource. So the ABCD virtual marketplace is a technique that we learned from a hosting by the Community Innovation Network and NeighborUp, which are out of Ohio, I think Cleveland. And they developed this virtual practice from an in-person process that was first developed by Trusted Space Partners, and that Trusted Space Partner shared with them in 2012. And they've been using a version of the marketplace in Ohio since 2012. They used to do it, I think, monthly in person, and it worked really well as an opportunity to surface some of the assets in community and create those connections in person. But they wanted to make sure that they could still keep doing that, so they made this virtual version which they've shared with many people now to kind of bring into their own communities. So the goal of a virtual marketplace or in-person marketplace is to uncover the gifts, talents, skills of those in your community, specifically of those who are in your circle or virtual circle, and to create connection points for people. And so this is a process for identifying those gifts and also creating the decentralization of connections. So how it works is there are typically 4 different roles. I don't know that we need all of those roles tonight, but typically you'll have your marketplace leader, and their role is to explain the process and guide people through. And I'm going to be fulfilling that role for us this evening. And then we have scribes, and their role is to capture the notes being shared by the speakers verbally and in the chat. And we're going to be using a Google spreadsheet to facilitate this process. We've also linked in the tool, in the PDF that you'll get, to a template that you can copy and use yourself. But we'll use a Google spreadsheet to kind of note what's coming up. And then you often will have a timekeeper, which guarantees each person is given a certain amount of time to speak. It can be anywhere, like usually it's 30 to 60 seconds. I think we can all take about 30 seconds tonight if we wish. And you kind of just choose that depending on the time of the amount of time you have, as well as the size of group you have, to kind of figure out what you're working with in terms of amounts of time. And so the timekeeper's role is to kind of just make sure we're on track so that everybody gets the opportunity to share. So what does the virtual marketplace look like? Everyone will get the opportunity to do one of four things. You can either make a request, so you're going to ask for something. That might be resources on a particular topic. It might be looking for somebody with experience with a particular tool, and that tool could be like, has anybody done an asset map before? That tool could be, does anybody know how to use an electric drill? Because I cannot figure it out. It can really be whatever you need it to be. And that request could also be like, I'm looking for a physical space that can accommodate 10 people outside, whatever that might look like. So you can make a request, or you can make an offer. So you might have something that you want to offer to the people in the circle. That could be, again, a resource. It could be a skill set. When I learned this, somebody offered to be a sounding board. They said, you know I really appreciate debriefing when I'm at a conference and learning, so I can be that to somebody. Again, that offer can really be whatever you whatever your imagination allows for. So you're going to either make a request or an offer. You can also make a declaration. So that's an opportunity for people participating to put something out there which they would like some accountability on, or which they would like to share with the group. So that might look like, I am going to go on a Jane's Walk this weekend, or I'm going to look up the Jane's Walk toolkit, or whatever that declaration may be. And then the fourth option you have is to pass. So nobody should ever feel pressured to participate. It is completely fine to just say, you know what, I'm going to pass for the night. So each person is going to have the opportunity to do one of those four things: either make a request, or make an offer, or make a declaration, or pass. And so then the connection piece works by as somebody is kind of taking up their 20 to 30 seconds to speak to whatever their request is or their offer is, if somebody wants to match with them, you can write your name in the chat matches with their name. So if Tyson's talking and Tyson's saying, oh, I'm offering to be a sounding board on how to use this asset map toolkit, then I might in the chat say Amanda matches with Tyson. So what that's going to do is that's going to get noted in the spreadsheet. And the point of this is not for then me to make sure the two of you connect, but it becomes a reference point. So you can look afterwards and say, oh, who did I match with? Who was it that I wanted to follow up with? And you have that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch the screen I'm sharing to share the spreadsheet. If I can find it again. And then we'll go through this process. And while I do that, is that clear for everyone? Does anybody have questions about this process? I think we're good. So what we're going to do is I will go first and then Tyson will go. I pulled the names of people based on registration. And I definitely know that not everybody who registered is here. And also there's a bunch of you who didn't have from the Eventbrite. So we'll go through the people who are here and already written down, and then the people who aren't written down already, we will loop back to you afterwards. And if you want you do not need to share your contact information, but if you do want to share your contact information with other people, you can also just send that in the chat and we'll make sure to add it to the chart later tonight, so you'll be able to go back and actually connect with one another. So I will go first. And so my name's Amanda. My community is, I kind of like see myself as being a part of the Water Calgary community, but I also live in downtown core and am connected to this place in the downtown. And I am going to tonight make an offer. And my offer is, if anybody would like to chat one-on-one about any ideas they have for how to build community during current COVID restrictions, considering those restrictions that are coming in probably tomorrow. If you ever need a sounding board to kind of like work through your ideas or to figure out how do we make this work given these conditions, I'm more than happy to be that soundboard. So I will be, that's my offer. And if you want to match with that, you can throw your name in the chat and say matches with me, but no pressure to do that. So that's me. Tyson, do you have something?
For me, I feel like it's a no pressure request, considering kind of where we are at, but culturally here. But I do think I would really, the toolkit that we sort of pinpointed to today, it'd be really great to be able to have as many folks as possible engage with that toolkit, because it's sort of a preliminary resource that we've created to sort of help hopefully expand a little bit more. And as kind of Amanda alluded to in 2 weeks, about like what next, what do you do with this information, or what actions can we begin to create out of this? And so we're hoping over the next little while that we'll be able to sort of begin to define and build on what does an asset mapping toolkit really look like? And so these are sort of the first initial stages of that. And so thank you everyone for sharing this time with me today, but also if that was something that you were interested in terms of following up on, whether it was in two weeks from now or in 2 months from now, you take that resource and you do it, awesome. We'd love to hear sort of your feedback and your thoughts. So that's me. Thanks, Amanda, for matching.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyson. I think next we have Anna. Anna, do you have a request, offer, declaration, or pass this evening?
Yeah, let me just consider. Perhaps I'll make an offer of, I am not of the Calgary community, I am of the Edmonton community. So I'll make an offer of anyone who is either visiting or interested in or would like to just connect about Edmonton things. I would be happy to be a host or just someone to muse with Edmonton things about.
Thanks, Anna.
You're welcome. I see our Edmonton cohort is expanding. It's great to have you here. Carol, I think you are next.
Okay, thank you. I would like to make a request for more information on community fridges, because I'm a foodie first. I love to share that with other people, and I think that would be a great thing to start up here in Edgemont.
I can definitely connect you with a few people.
Awesome. So I've written Tyson down as a match there. And if anybody else has some information, definitely feel free to match in the chat. Thanks, Carol. So next up, we have D. Yes, you are still here. Deirdre?
Yeah, sorry.
It's all good.
So actually, Amanda, I'd actually like to match with you, actually getting more information about how to connect with how to do community building during COVID. So.
Awesome. Do you have any other requests or offers that you want to make, or that's where we're focused right now?
Yeah, I think we're mostly focused on trying to build community. Yeah, again, where I'm up in Edgemont with Carol. So we're talking about ways we can build community, and it'd be great, I think, to have a chat with you about it.
Sounds great. Awesome, thank you. Next up, I see Elizabeth.
I recently discovered a link for Alberta phone books. And the way I'm using that is to find out when somebody in the family moved from one address to another. So I haven't yet checked the addresses for where my mother lived near Crescent Heights when she was in elementary school. So if anybody's interested in doing that, it's free to look at the phone books. You have to look at one phone book at a time, but it's rather fun if you're trying to put together some stories and family pictures. So I can offer to tell people about that in email if they want to know. The city directories are online for 1910 to 1953. And of course, I want to know what's in the later ones that are locked up at the downtown library. The city directories go up to about 1990. So doing what we can online right now, and keeping a list of what I can look up when the library opens next.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. So Elizabeth has an offer for a link to Alberta phone books and city directories from 1910 to 1953 to support historical research. That's really cool. Next up, I have Julie.
Yes, hi, everyone. I will put out an offer that's related to my job. So when not doing Jane's Walk, which is most of the year, I run our grassroots granting programs over at Calgary Foundation. So if people are looking to know what kind of very small micro funding is available to support community building projects, you can certainly, I can have my contact info here. You're welcome to reach out and I can explain what's available at Calgary Foundation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Julie. I know they came up at our last meetup, and I think also the meetup before. So it's a recurring theme here. Wonderful. So we have an offer from Julie to talk about grassroots grants at Calgary Foundation. Kari, I have you next.
Hi, everybody. I don't know what to say. My community is Lakeview, and I'll just maybe give an update. So I have, after being in the course with Amanda and Tyson, and my kind of goal to explore opportunities to build community within Lakeview and between Tsutsina and Lakeview. I did reach out to the Lakeview Association and found out what's going on, at least over the last little while. And so hoping to get more involved on that. And so if anybody has any suggestions or connections on that, my view, like, I guess I'd like to see Lakeview communicate more with the community, as well as all the people that come in to enjoy North Glenmore Park, about the history of First Nations, as well as Calgary's history, and how people are all contributing, so that it feels a little more inclusive and people and as well as educational. So that's my ask, I guess, if anybody has anything. And then I have a background in human rights and diversity, so I put it out there that if anybody has any questions or would like any information that I can share, I'd be happy to do that. I just actually last weekend did a session with some clients with the CNIB and was able to help clarify a few things on human rights and what our rights are on the federal and provincial level. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Kari. Next up, we have Leanne.
Hello. So I'll put my community as being Livingston for tonight, which is the community that I live in. And I guess I'll put an offer out there. I am consistently looking at and thinking about and trying to come up with things that build community from home. So without people having to leave their, whether that's a unit. I work professionally with seniors who live in seniors apartment buildings, whether that's not having to leave your unit or not having to leave your home. So I can certainly either provide those ideas, or likely I'm also crafty, even provide some supplies and support to do that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Leanne. I think that sounds a little like what you've also offered to do at our special June event too, right? So many layers to that offer from me. Thank you. Paulina, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paulina, and my community as of recently is Belmont. So I'm deep southwest. I think like my offer would be having those discussions with people on how to evolve newly established communities and build connection in times of COVID. And also I live in like a townhouse complex. So I'm curious, I've heard lots of people kind of come up with strategies and ways they do things if they're in a condo complex, or if they're in townhomes, or if they're kind of in single family homes. So based on this context, kind of like what are the most effective ways to build community within your home, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you, Paulina.
Thanks.
Sabita, you are next.
Okay. Hi. I'm not sure it's an offer or declaration, this information. I just want to share that we are planning to do a community garden with various ethnic groups this year at the CCIS farmland in Southeast. So if anyone interested or would like to learn more about this project, then I can share with the group. And yeah, this is our first, and actually the organization wise, it will be third year, but from our program, it's our first year project. So we are trying to bring different ethnic groups to be involved in this project.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sabita.
Yeah, thank you.
Up next, we have Sandra.
Hello, I'm Sandra. I don't know what to put as my community. I live out in Cochrane, but the community that I am working the most in is Acadia. So, so I guess I kind of have an offer and a request, if that's all right. The offer is if you want to learn more about Cochrane's community, please reach out. I'm very passionate about my community. I would love to take you on a walk around about Cochrane and show you some of the assets we have here. I think Cochrane has some unique use of their spaces. We just put in a community fridge, in fact, so we're pretty excited about that. It's going live just next week. And so forth. So please reach out. I would love to show you my community. I guess the request would be is moving into Acadia to be a community facilitator. It's a very new community for me. So if anyone had any resource or connection or anything of anyone that would be able to show me or give me the same walkthrough, I would really appreciate that, because it would be great. I've been definitely reaching out. I've talked to the community center. I've talked to the United Church. I actually just purchased a plot at the community garden to do community gardening. So I'm getting there. But yeah, if anyone has some insight on Acadia, I'd love to hear from it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And as a reminder to people, if you want to match, you can throw it in the chat. And also, if you are willing to have your contact information exchanged, also throw that in the chat, because we'll only add in contact information for people who have sent it in the chat. Next up, we have Jody.
Hi, so my community is North Haven, and hopefully I have a simple request. I kind of got this idea actually from Leanne when we were doing our last practitioners meeting, but so I'm the president of our community association, and of course we've had online meetings since I think maybe in April we started. And I just feel like I think everybody's a little burnt out. You don't get that social interaction. So I thought it might be nice to drop off some type of food item at everybody's house before the meeting. So I do have my VP as well going to help me do that. But my request is, does anybody have any ideas of what I can get? Like I'm thinking a food item, but people may have a better idea. The thought with food was that if I could drop it off, then we could all eat during the meeting. So that was kind of my thought, but I'm thinking it has to be something, you know, packaged or that we can pick up. And we have 15 of us, and we are using obviously community funds. So it can't be too expensive. So if anybody has any ideas or, you know, like a bakery that would do something. North Haven is kind of central. It's 14th Street and John Laurie. So I don't have time to drive way down to the south to some great bakery or something like that. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Jody. And last up is Lindsay, who had to step out a couple of minutes ago, but did send something in the chat that they wanted me to share on their behalf. So Lindsay shared, oh, I guess you can all see it, but just in case you're not seeing the chat, I have to run, but wanted to say I'm new to community development and would love to be able to reach others with some direction and advice on community development. So Lindsay is looking for advice and support on community development. And that brings us, I think everybody's had a chance to speak now, right? I didn't miss anybody?
I don't think so.
Perfect. So that's the process. It's pretty straightforward. What we'll do is I'll kind of go through the chat after the meeting ends and make sure to update it with the contact information that's been added. And we'll send out the link to those of you who were a part of this portion of the evening. And then you can kind of look at the spreadsheet on your own. And if you matched already with somebody, then you can kind of reach out to them if they've included their contact information. So it's kind of like on the hands of the people who said they wanted to match to do that. If you didn't match with anybody tonight, but tomorrow you wake up and I'm like, oh, Jody, I have the perfect idea for what you should do for food. If Jody's information is there, you can reach out to Jody and answer that request. So it's a pretty simple process, but it's a really beautiful way to give everybody space and time to kind of like really think about what is it that I'm like thinking about right now? What do I have to offer? What am I looking for? And you never know what beautiful connections will be made. So we wanted to share this once again as something that can easily be done in our communities. It's something that works really well online. It was designed to be in person. And in the toolkit itself, we've included links to, or in the one pager on this, we've included links to where we got that information. And I'm going to throw them again in the chat so you can look it up, especially if you're interested in some of that in-person version for when we do eventually get to being able to do that again. But yeah, that's kind of what we wanted to share with regards to the toolkit. Any thoughts or questions on the toolkit?
I love it, Amanda. And I just wanted to say every time I participate in this, which is only, I think, the second, maybe third of this process, it makes more sense and it becomes more like valuable to me as far as like picturing like, oh, this could do that, or this would be a great place to try this process out. So thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that it's so simple that it seems complicated, but it's definitely the more you do it, the more value you see. And something that was interesting when I learned about it is they talked about how when they do it in person, it does tend to be, the exchanges tend to be on those really localized immediate needs. Like, I need a hammer this weekend because we're putting up pictures, or like I love gardening, but don't have a plot. So I'd love to be able to help somebody with their garden. When it's virtual, there tends to be like a little bit less of that they found. And then it does tend to kind of be some of these like more intangible exchanges. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting technique to use and bring into those community spaces and really encourage that exchange and kind of honoring that we all have something to offer. And we wouldn't necessarily think about like, oh, having ideas of food that a group might be able to use. We wouldn't think about that necessarily as being something that's really valuable and helpful, but it really can be. So what we'll do now is we will move to our kind of formal closeout. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for now. So we'll move to our formal closeout for the evening. But if people want to stick around afterwards and keep chatting or connecting, you're welcome to. But this will also give people a chance to sign off if that's what you need to do now too. So to bring us to our formal close for the evening, we would first like to say thank you everybody for coming out tonight, for being a part of this and spending your Monday evening with us. We know there's a lot going on right now. It's really challenging times, and we're also being requested to be in front of our screens perhaps more than we've ever wanted to. So we really do appreciate when people are willing to log in one more time to be with us. Yeah, we know that is really taxing and draining. So thank you for doing that. We also want to say a huge thank you to Julie for being one of those people, for coming out, for sharing all of that wisdom about James Walks, and also really highlighting the beauty of that and how important it is. So we're so grateful that you were able to be with us tonight and that you are able to stay too and provide insights throughout the whole evening. And a huge thank you to Tyson for jumping in, for designing this toolkit and finding ways to make it work. Your creativity and ability to always just sort of dive in and make things happen never ceases to amaze me. So grateful for you and pulling this together, and for your idea to go on a walk and to do that as part of our chat. I loved that we were able to kind of explore somewhere new together, even if we were all, the rest of us were all in our homes. So thanks, Tyson. And so to bring us to our formal close, we'd like to offer everyone the opportunity to share in one word or a couple of words, either in the chat or by unmuting yourself, something that you're leaving with, something you're grateful for, or an action that you plan to take after tonight.
I'd like to ask Sandra if she's part of Acadia Networking.
Oh, I don't know nothing yet. I don't think so. I'm writing that down. Is that on a website or Facebook?
No, it's part of the work that the social worker's been doing in Acadia and Kingsland.
Oh, I'm sure I can find that out then. Okay, thank you. I'll definitely look that up.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I see in the chat, Paulina shared, thank you for inspiring me to explore and discover all the amazing things on a broader City of Calgary community. And Carol also shared, thank you for a nice session.
And this is Sandra. I just wanted to say thank you too. I always leave with something. Like I always leave with something I'm going to think about, or something I'm going to research, or something I've learned, or a connection I've made. So I really want to tell you, I really appreciate these sessions as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Leanne shared in, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say something that I learned was, and this was something that Paulina kind of was mentioning, that, you know, she lives in a newer community like Belmont, that I just kind of researched actually this week, and thinking, well, what does this asset mapping? So for me, and what I'm going to do is maybe look at going to a very new community and walking around and doing this asset mapping, but then also maybe going to a community like Acadia, or, you know, maybe more of the more suburban neighborhoods, and seeing what does that look like. Because I think it can be very, of course, it can be very, very different as, and being also not just new, but a different time period, I guess, of a community in their transition. So thank you.
I'm going to go find that cat. That's what I'm taking away. I'm going to go find that little cat image.
I see in the chat we have from Leanne, I learned how much I enjoy a virtual walk, something I didn't think I would, and I did so much. Same. Kari shared, I appreciate seeing the mapping in action. I will go find that lion. And Carol shared, I learned how easy it really is to make new contacts. I'm an introvert. I know these spaces seem very scary as a fellow introvert, but yeah, they're always such wonderful spaces for meeting people who care about community too. So we're glad you were here. Any other takeaways, actions, or gratitudes you want to share before we formally sign off?
It's Kari again. I just want to say thank you to Julie for the suggestion that she sent to me already.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Wonderful. Well, if there's nothing else, then thank you once again. And if you want to sign off, you are more than welcome to do so. We'll kind of formally close it now. And if you want to stay and keep chatting, then we'll keep this open for a little while longer. Thank you so much for being here for another great evening, and hopefully we will talk again soon.